Hey, what's up? This is Jason Wisdom for BecauseIt'sTrue.com. And today I want to take a question that was submitted via the website. And if you have any questions that you'd like to submit, just go to the website BecauseIt'sTrue.com, click on the Contact tab, and then you can submit your questions that way. Today's question comes from the other side of the world. I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia, and this question comes from the Ukraine. And it says, the issue of tolerance, that is, tolerance of other people's lifestyles and beliefs, has been in the limelight in the U.S. for quite some time. However, in the Ukraine, it's a question that's only beginning to form. And so the question is, how should Christians approach the issue of tolerance? That's an excellent question. And I'm not going to have time to get into all of the specific issues that where tolerance is typically invoked. That would take several different vlogs here to get into. By the way, I learned that word vlog, so I'll try to stop saying video blog like the technological moron that I am. But anyway, I can't get into all that in just this one. So what I want to do here is I want to speak to a really foundational issue, and that is how do we disagree with one another, and what is tolerance? Because I think there's misunderstandings on both of those fronts that really are foundational to making better conversations on all of the issues that I don't have time to get into right now. So the first thing to do is to define our terms. And I printed out a couple definitions here. The first one comes from Webster's. And Webster says that tolerance is the willingness to accept feelings, habits, or beliefs that are different from your own. And then dictionary.com, which I think more people use nowadays, even than Webster, says it's the ability to tolerate something. I hate when you include the word in the definition itself, but anyway, the ability to tolerate something in particular, the existence of opinions or behavior that one does not necessarily agree with. And you notice that right off the bat, disagreement is inherent to the idea of tolerance. So nowadays, when people use tolerance, they tend to say that tolerance is equivalent to sort of like unquestioning, uncritical support for something. But that's not tolerance, that's agreement. Or on the other side, on the flip side, people will throw around the intolerant word as a charge that says, well, if you're intolerant, that means you're irrationally backwards, or you're irrational in your disagreement with me. But disagreement is inherent to the idea of tolerance. And I think that by and large, at least here in the U.S., I think by and large people are generally pretty tolerant within the confines of the law. They want to be tolerated, and they want to live and let live with other people. I know there's exceptions to that, but I think that, by and large, that's the reason that the idea of tolerance has sort of risen to become like the cardinal virtue of the Western world nowadays. It seems like, even if you have no other moral standards whatsoever, tolerance. There it is. You got to have that. And I think that's because people are generally tolerant of other individuals. However, it's actually impossible to have that sort of live and let live tolerance in the areas where tolerance is most commonly thrown around. The word tolerance is most commonly thrown around, and that is the political arena and in legal matters. And the reason that it's impossible in those fields is because the people who are debating those issues and the people who are deciding the laws can't simply say, okay, well, we'll go hang out in our side and we'll leave you guys alone who disagree with us, and the other side, okay, well, we'll leave you alone. They have to come together. They have to disagree openly and sometimes in ugly ways. They have to have the conflict and work it out. That's just how it goes. And yet you'll have politicians screaming across the aisle at one another, you're intolerant. And what they're really saying is, you disagree with me and I don't like that, which is duh. I mean, clearly that's what's going to happen in any issue where there's disagreement. But also, because tolerance has become sort of the cardinal virtue, throwing out the word intolerance also carries the added punch of painting the other person as sort of being backwards and bigoted and irrational. And as such, There's sort of a tolerance trump card that people can play now. But I hope you can see that the first person to play the intolerance trump card is being just as intolerant of the other person's views, for which they're saying you're intolerant. And so really what I want to get at is that tolerance is typically thrown around in a very disingenuous sort of way to basically an attempt to paint the person that disagrees with you in such a light that you don't have to give reasons for what your position is. It's just my position is the right one in virtue of the fact that I'm not the intolerant one, that I'm not the bigoted one, I'm not irrational and I'm not backwards, and that person clearly is. And so there's several problems with that. The biggest one is that it tends to be circular and question begging in the way it's presented. Someone says, for instance, it kind of plays out like this, well, that view that you hold is intolerant. Well, why? Well, because you are a terrible and intolerant person. Okay, well, how do you know that? Well, because your views are intolerant, and so forth and so on. And it just ultimately rounds back out to a misuse of the word tolerance as sort of a club or a trump card to beat the person over the head with. On top of that, just really briefly, kind of going over my time, but I really briefly want to say something about how tolerance, the idea of tolerance, relates to morality. And specifically, when it comes to legal matters and political issues, if a person's going to say that a nation's laws or practices are unjust, that person has to presuppose that there's some sort of objective, greater moral standard by which they measure the justice of a nation's laws. It can't simply be that, well, the law of the land is what's right and wrong, and therefore in this case we need to change the law of the land because it doesn't reflect what we believe is right. Well, that doesn't make any sense, because if the laws of the land are what's right and wrong, then there's no room left to reform the laws of right and wrong. On the other side, if it's simply that, well, we want to change it because it's what we think is right and wrong, we want to change it to suit me, well, then we're back at just pure subjectivism, where there really is no standard by which to judge and say, well, that's absolutely right or that's absolutely wrong. So a lot of times the people who are throwing around the charge of tolerance or intolerance don't have a leg to stand on from a moral point of view. Who says is the question that always comes up, like the children playing on the playground, and one kid says, well, you can't do that, and the other kid says, well, who says? At that point, you're left trying to find out what is the standard. And we know that not all behavior is created equal. We all know that from the playground. We know not all behavior is equal. And so who says that we should have to be tolerant of any particular behavior that may arise in any of these heated issues? So beyond that, like I said, even if I as an individual am incredibly tolerant of another person who has different beliefs or different practices, different behaviors that I might disagree with, that doesn't work when it comes to the issues in the political world and the legal world. And so like I said, I say all of that to sort of just lay some groundwork for discussions that you might have with your friends and with coworkers and people like that on the idea of tolerance, and just asking, okay, well, what do you mean by tolerance? What is that? And I think most of the time people don't know what they mean by tolerance, or they're using it in an incorrect way, and they don't really know how to disagree with one another. So I hope that helps, and I will see you again next time.